I was gonna name this episode "Fuck Them Kids." I'm talking about my choice to be child free. I'm talking about my choice to be child free today, and this is an episode and a conversation that isn't just for people who also are choosing to not have kids, but for people who have kids. People who've ever thought about it will probably think about it, know someone who is thinking about it. It is a conversation that I feel is very necessary. I was born to a woman who knew she always wanted children. Literally, I asked my mom, I said, "What did you want to be when you grew up?" Like when you were asked that as a child, what was your response? Because, fun fact, my response was to be an astronaut. That was the very first thing that I wanted to be when I was a child. And so when I asked her, she said, "A mom." So much so that she had my name picked out. Shout out to that because my name is fire. She had my name picked out ever since she was a child. She was babysitting a next door neighbor. This next door neighbor was amazing. Her name was Jewel. Shout out to Jewel. Shout out to that Jewel who lived next door. And my mother was like, she had all of the qualities that she would want in a future child. So she had that name in her back pocket. And when I was born to her as her firstborn, she gave me that name that she's been waiting to name her child for. And that was her legacy, was to be a parent, was to have children. And I, as a result, am her legacy, right? And so what that meant for me as a child was she would say things like, "You represent me." And maybe you've heard a variety or a variation to that degree, right? Like I always represented her. I had to always act and behave in a way that she wanted me to be, not for my own benefit, but for her benefit. And I hated, truly hated that feeling. I'm all for making someone proud, but there was this layer of knowing that I was an extension of her in a way that I didn't consent to. And she had all of these dreams for me to be something that I did not choose to be for myself. And so I open up with that because one, I'm incredibly glad that she chose to have me. I think that there are people in this world like my mom who that is their greatest gift to procreate, to bring children into this world and to be a parent. That is what they want. And so if you are that person, shout out to you listening. This is an episode that you can listen to as well. All of these episodes are for people to listen to and to expand their mind and to get a specific perspective. What I'm sharing in this podcast today are not unique. I mean, if you do a Google search, if you've listened to podcasts where people are like, "I am child free, I am childless, I'd rather be the rich auntie." I mean, some of the things that I'm going to cover in this time will be things that you may have heard before. I want to say that, I'm not going to do the thing that people do, which is affirm that I love children, because that actually doesn't matter. Let me say that again. I'm not going to affirm that I love children because it actually doesn't matter in this conversation. We can love many things, and that does not mean that we want them for ourselves. I will say that this conversation is usually met with so much judgment and disdain by other women, and so the judgment may sound like you'll regret it when you get older. And fun fact is if you actually don't want to do something, you actually won't experience regret because regret comes from actually wanting to do something and then having not done it. And then you feel bad about having not done it. So when you don't want to do something, you actually can't feel that feeling of regret. But that's one of the things that you'll hear. You may also hear, "Who will take care of you when you get older?" Or if something happens to you, who's going to take care of you? And an extension of that is you may hear, "You'll die alone." Well, a fun fact, we all do, meaning that there is only one body at a time, right? That is decaying in that way. that is losing breath in that way. There's a name on my birth certificate and there's a name on my death certificate one day. Essentially, we're all going to do that solo. Okay. Morbid, but true. And so, this concept of having children rooted in they'll take care of you, you'll die alone without them, it's not true. I mean, I don't speak to my mom, and I believe she's doing fine. And so, it doesn't mean that because you have children, they will be up under your ass all your life and feel indebted to you all of their life. It's just simply not true. I know so many people who are not connected to their mothers, and that's okay. And that's more on that in later episodes. More on that in later episodes. Okay. You may also hear you don't know what you want. I heard this a lot. When I made this decision was 2021. This podcast is being recorded in February 2024. So when I made this decision in the summer of 2021, it's interesting because I mean, I was 33, but they're still like, well, you're still of technical childbearing age. And if you think about it a little bit more, maybe you'll change your mind. So you don't really know what you want yet. Well, let me tell you something. At 33, I know the things that I want. And I'm going to tell you this right now, even if I was 23 and I made that decision, I also think that that is completely valid. I don't think that age means that you know more or less about your body. I'm just saying that it just so happened to be at 33. I genuinely did. You'll also hear, you'll never know true unconditional love. And you'll also say that you also hear that legacy, you won't be able to have a legacy in this world. You won't be able to have someone carry on your name. Now, that is also, a lot of these are rooted in the patriarchy because this concept of someone carrying on your name and all of these things, I'm like, for me, it is clear that my legacy is not based off of a human that I bring into the world. My legacy is based off things like this podcast. My legacy is based off of the music that I make. My legacy is based off of the activism that I do and have done in this world. I'm a part of racist, misogynist statues being removed. I'm a part of fighting for $15 of minimum wage in New York City. I'm a part of so much activism. And if I were to have my life end today, I would be proud of all the things that I have done. And all of that is without having a child. And so there is a power in choosing to create the legacy that you want outside of anyone else. So if you think about what I shared earlier, that there was this pressure. And it's interesting that I felt the pressure as a child because I excelled a lot as a child. I mean, flex, flex, flex. I did ballet, I did tap, I was an honor roll student, flex, flex, Yeah, I was vice president, flex. I was president of, different organizations, flex. I mean, yeah. But I still felt this pressure to kind of do the things that I was expected to do before I was even born. I didn't feel like there was a conversation around forging your own path. It was like, well, you are my child. So you are expected to do these things that I have laid out for you before I even met you. I'm expecting you to marry this gender. I'm expecting for you to never leave home. I'm expecting for when I call you to you to always answer. I'm expect all of these expectations, and it felt uncomfortable. And obviously I couldn't name that as a kid, but now at 36, I can name that discomfort. I can name that I was listening to how my life was a part of someone else's legacy, and that felt uncomfortable for me. So, how beautiful it is to curate a legacy without having to put that on someone else. It is fully on me. That's actually super beautiful. No one ever asks people, you know, about why they do want children. A lot of the times, when I say that I don't want children, they'll say, why? And they'll say things like, I think you'll be such a good mom. And this is quiet as it's kept. How do you know if someone's going to be a good mom? I'm pausing because I want you to ask yourself that. How do you know if someone's going to be a good mom? Because they are a nurturer? We know that parenting comes with more than being a nurturer. Is it because they're financially stable? We know that parenting comes with more than financial stability. Is it because they're good conversationalists? Is it because they are funny? Is it because they are smart? I mean, what are these things that we are saying is going to make someone a good parent? Because the reality is, I can't answer that for anyone. You could think someone can be a good parent and then you parent with them and you're like, what the fuck? You heard that, Kay? What the fuck? Because sometimes I wonder, considering, who my father is, I'm like, whoa, I don't think there was much of a question as to what type of parent he would be. And I wish there was. I wish people actually had conversations as to, why do I want children? Is it solely because of legacy? Is it solely because I think children are joyful? Because you can also think kids can bring you joy and not actually birth them. So I actually think that that's a question that people should really ask themselves. So if you are a person who wants to have children, one, I applaud you. I think that being a parent is it's a superpower if you do it well. It's a major level of sacrifice if you do it well. Um, and so, if you are someone who is thinking of having children, or if you're a person who has children, I'm curious if you ever asked yourself why, and really dive deeper. Like, ask yourself that question and then ask a deeper question based off of that answer, and then ask a deeper question, like go super deep as to why that decision is there. And people typically, if you say that you want to have children, they're typically not in the business of trying to convince you like that you're wrong, right? So if you say I want to have children, they're like, good. No one's like, you sure? But when you say you don't want to have kids, that's when people are like, are you sure? And they'll say all the things that I named before. So here are my reasons why. I truly never had a desire to carry and give birth to a baby. This baby fever never came. I remember my cousin, who is a year older than me, she had children in her mid 20s. And I thought about how my mom, she had me after her sister had her child, which is my cousin. And the reason why I'm naming that is my mom talked about she knew she always wanted to have a child, but she also was like, once I saw my sister pregnant and have her daughter, I was like, oh, I need to do this now. I mean, the time is now. Baby fever. I mean, give her a thermometer. Give her a thermometer. The baby fever was through the roof. And so when my cousin had a baby, because I don't have a sister that I claim, I don't have a sister that I claim. So that more on that later. And so when my cousin had her first child, I waited for that feeling. And I was like, I don't got it. Like, I really don't have this desire. And I heard about her process, and, I know about birthing from like a analytical research based, read a book or three, about it, saw a documentary or a few about it, but I didn't have this desire and I thought it would. So then people started to have babies around me, friends and things, and it never came. And so I had to really sit with that. Like the desire to actually do the thing it never came. Also, I was socialized to have a child, and I'm very well aware of that. And that socialization came from things as, when I was a child, being an older sibling and playing and being a caretaker in a specific way, or just getting baby dolls. And the baby dolls are all about taking care of them. If you think about toys that society tends to push on young girls, they're very baby centered, right? Very mommy centered, very Well, I mean, we're not going to talk about how heteronormative all of this is, or are we? But yeah, very heteronormative, but it was rooted in that. I mean, if you think of, you know, I love to be able to activate the thought process. Think about toys that you may have given or have received, if this is an identity that you have as a child or to a child, a baby doll. You know those dolls that like used to like they cry and they pee and they gotta. I mean, come on. I mean, as a child, I am socialized to be a mother even before I thought about what that actually means. There's a socialization there. I remember, I had my first episode being about, having no more periods, and I remember getting my period, and my mom said, "Well, now you are a woman," and I said, "Already?" She said, "Now you are a woman. You can have children." I was 10. I was like, woman, children, what? She was like, "Yes, that is now what your body is able to do. So don't you go around, having sex because we don't want to have no babies up in this house." And I was like, "Baby, what is happening? What?" So then we fast forward. And so I think about my time as a teacher, which also is the reason why I don't want to have kids. I was a preschool teacher. I was a teacher of many different age groups, but we're going to focus on my role as a preschool teacher. So I was a preschool teacher. I went to school, my undergrad, I explored elementary education, and grad school, early childhood special education. And from it's interesting because my studies, specifically in grad school, I remember it was always rooted on when you have children one day, or as a mom, because it was very predominantly like the grad program that I was in was very predominantly women, like cis women, specifically cis women based. And so it's giving more on that later. I mean, that's something more to explore. But so I'm in class. The professors are mothers, and they're talking about how their parenting helped them to be better teachers and all these things. And so everyone's talking about parenting and teaching linked, parenting, teaching linked. And so, and we'll get to my time as a teacher because obviously I had to go to school for it. So while I'm in school, the more you learn about child development, it really has you thinking about parenting. The more you learn about how children learn, if and not even just on an educational level, but just social, emotional learning. Now I used to interview people damn near like, okay, so what type of parent will you be? What is your thoughts about children and independence? What is your thoughts about public school versus private school? What is your thoughts about, and then I didn't meet people who had an understanding because actually most people, unless you have went to school and studied it, actually have no understanding about child development. They have no understanding about discipline. They have no understanding about behavioral management. They have no understanding about things that actually are a part of like raising, rearing, guiding a child. And I know people are like, there's no book on parenting. Yes, there is no book on parenting. But if you have ever went to a traditional educational process of education and child development, you will know that you now know more than most people. You just do from a research study base level, and it involves going into classrooms and observing children. I mean, it's so much of that, and you realize like, damn, I know a lot more than a lot of other people. And it doesn't mean that I'm gonna be a great parent, but it's just saying that actually people don't know much about child development. So my research and intense study on child development and excelling in that. I mean, grad school had a 4.0, baby. Okay. Excelling in that and really understanding it and realizing how most people, typical people, just didn't have a basic understanding. And I was like, wait a minute, raising a child with you would be horrible because you don't know shit. And that's just conversations that I had with people in the past, not current. So my time as a teacher, let's go there. My time as a teacher made me realize that, whoa, especially preschool, because I was with these students from about 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, I was with them more than their mothers. So much so they were calling me mom. And I was like, what we're not gonna do is call me that. I'm Miss Cadet. Well, now at the time of this podcast, I'm Mrs. Cadet, period. But I was like, I'm Miss Cadet. We're not gonna do that. I'm not your mom. And not in a rude way, but it was just like, let's have a differentiation here. Like, that's your mom and I'm your teacher. But I realized all that goes into it. And I said, that requires a lot. I also see how someone can also burn out. And I don't think that's something people talk about enough is the burnout of parenting and how as soon as you become a parent, everything, all your other identities go to the background. It's literally the child over everything. And even though we live in a world where we know you're supposed to put your mask on, we think about plane safety here. You're supposed to put your mask on before you help anyone else. I'm sure that there's so many parents who would be like, absolutely not, my child over everything. I will give my life to my child. My child is I will sacrifice everything. I met a mom a couple months ago and she talked about being a singer. And she was like, I'm a singer. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, do you have music out and stuff? She was like, well, I stopped singing because I have a child. And she like put her head down. She's like, I love my children. I love my babies, but I decided to have them and I gave up on my dream. Now, there are parents. Come on now. Shout out to Beyonce. Shout out to Rihanna. I mean, and I'm using them because from a societal level, right? We can know that these people you can be so massively successful and have children. This is not what I'm saying. Lean in more. Lean in. Listen. I am saying that it requires an incredible amount of sacrifice. And when I was teaching and I watched how the mothers and parents, but specifically we're talking about mothers here, walked in incredibly burnt out, which was also very interesting because I really had their child for almost 12 hours of the day. But they came in incredibly burnt out and they were like, they would tell their children, like, as you get in the house, we're gonna give you a bath and you're going straight to bed. And I would sit there like, wait a minute, what about child engagement? And I thought about it. People are tired. The world we live in is so hard on Black women. The economy's fucked. There's not a lot of support. And so I'm not judging these mothers, but I am saying burnout is one hell of a thing. And I saw it. And as a teacher, I was burnt out. And I watched the parents be burnt out. And I said, geez, kids require a lot of energy. And it is okay if that is not something that you want to give your energy to. Another reason that I have is my lack of connection with my mother and a lack of mother figures in my life. And, my experience being mothered heavily plays a role in me not wanting to be a mom. And, some people can say, well, if you weren't mothered in the way that you would like, you can do something like be better. And I'm like, easier said than done, right? Because honestly, when I truly think about that, my life was very reared in the beginning by my mother and my grandmother. And honestly, I can't say the beginning, throughout my life. Up until my late 20s when my grandmother was in the nursing home and with dementia. But throughout my life, my grandmother was really the center. I loved and still love, because shout out to ancestor work, still love my grandmother, even though she passed from this physical realm in 2020. And when I think about a child in this world and I don't have a relationship with my mother, I'm like, grandmothers are so important. And my grandmother was so important. And so the thought of having a child and that child, when I have a relationship with my mother, their grandmother, is something that completely turned me off from having children, because I don't believe that. I feel like I need to have a good relationship with my mom. I don't feel like, oh, the child is going to make me have a good relationship with my mom. No, if we ain't have it before the child, we probably not going to have it after. And then now I'm going to sit here and be like, I don't like you, but I don't want you to be away from your grandchild. Absolutely not. So my relationship, or lack thereof, with my mother has, very much influenced me not wanting a child. Like, not having a grandmother figure for the child, like, I can't fathom that. And if anybody listen, y'all love your grandmas, like, Grandmas are so lit. Oh my goodness. A grandmother's love? Baby. And so with that, another reason that links to that thing is generational healing. I am the generational curse breaker from the mother, grandmother, you know what I mean? Like that type of lineage. I am that person and it is hard work and I am tired. And so while one perspective can say, yeah, bringing a child into this world can break the curse. No, another way to look at it. I mean, no, meaning that's not the only reason. I'm sure it can, right? If you've had a tough relationship with your mother and grandmother or different women in your life, totally you can bring a child in to have a different experience, right? But let's think about the other way around, how it can also be healing to say, you know what? It's clipped. It ends with me. It ends with the curse breaker because curse breaking is hard work. And so when you really think about that, it actually can be generational healing to choose to not carry on the generational trauma that I have in my body because of my mother, that my mother has in her body because of her mother, and my grandmother had because you get what I'm saying? Like it actually can be healing to say the buck stops with me. It ends here. The healing starts with me and the trauma stops with me. Let me say that one more time for the one time for the people in the back, the people with the who not listening. The generational trauma ends with me and the generational healing starts with me. And that is extremely difficult, hard, yet liberation work. Very, very liberatory to say both. The trauma ends with me and the healing starts with me. It's really giving I gotta put me first, Lucius, as well, is my other reason. Because it's actually really liberating to center ourselves. You know, I would say Generation X and after, we are part of a group of people who can truly imagine life without being centered around being a mom, right? We can say things like, we care about our careers, whatever they are. We can say things like, we want to just keep the money for ourselves. We want to say things like, look, I want to go on vacation and it just be me and my partner or just me or whatever. Like, I think that there's an era of that. And shout out to even Gen Z, you know, the generation after me. There's so much to learn from Gen Z, and that will be a whole podcast episode. There's so much that people can learn from, you know, younger generations and research it, y'all. There are articles where people are talking about that people are choosing to not have children for a variety of different reasons. And I think a lot of it is rooted in people are seeing that you get to choose you first and you get to be and I don't even like to use the word selfish because it has just a negative connotation. But the reality is if you really break down what it is without the negative connotation, it's actually super beautiful to just put you first. I gotta put me first, Lucius. I gotta put me first. Because like I said earlier, as soon as you find out that you're pregnant, you have to be a mother first and then everything else. And then everything else. And even if you're talking about spouse wise, you know, no, the expectation in society is like you put that child first. That's the expectation. And I'm in my independence era. I'm in an era of not wanting to take care after, like, take care of another person. I just am. I just don't. I have caretaked my entire life. I'm an older sibling, like I said. Then I did the thing that I think a lot of Black women do is attract people who you have to also take care of them too, make their doctor's appointments, damn near scrub their ass, damn near, you know, I mean, teach them what to do, tell them to count to 1 through 5, jump up and down. I mean, come on. I'm tired. I'm tired. And, you know, that independence era can literally be like, I don't feel like taking care of nobody else. If I'm tired and I come home and I'm like, you know what? I want to just have a bowl of cereal. That's my dinner. I don't gotta have a child looking up at me like, well, I'm hungry and what about this and that? And listen, that's the era that I'm in. And when I say era is not like is going to be like this for the next 10 years. That's just it from here on out. Like that's the era. The era is I spent 33 years socialized to be a mom, then realized at 33 that I did not want to be. And that's what it's going to be going forward. Independence. And be in centering oneself after my whole life of not being able to do that. I also want to say the state of the world, y'all. The state of the world, homophobia, transphobia, racism, environmental racism, war. I mean, what a time to bring in a child. What a time. And so, how do I channel, right? How do I still create? Because I still believe in legacy. I still believe in creating. And so I channel that energy and I channel that energy by creating and nurturing spaces, community spaces. I think one of my most favorite spaces that I curated and nurtured was Sunday Survivor Series, a healing space for Black folks that started in the peak of the pandemic and went on for 16 months, where people got a chance to, for free, be in a virtual healing space. And I think about how beautiful that was to be able to nurture that. And I'm like, ooh, in so many ways, that was my baby. That was my baby. And I think about so many things that I started and everything, so many things that I poured into. And so that's how you can channel that energy. Cause I do think that creator energy is divine feminine energy. It is. And so, I think it's so much beauty in nurturing something and bringing something to life. But I want us to think that we can think about it in an expansive way. It doesn't have to be a human. I mean, you can love plants. You ever like nurture the plant, water the plant. I mean, and it grows and it's so beautiful. I mean, there's so many things that we can do in this world to create and pour in and watch it grow. I think about how there's so many things that people like to make synonymous with being a woman. And womanhood is not synonymous with having children because I specifically think about that when I think about who I honor as I even have this conversation. I honor people who can't have children biologically. I honor queer women and other marginalized women who didn't have access to things like IVF or surrogacy in the ways that we do nowadays. I think about people who are not able to have children biologically for a variety of different reasons. And you're still a woman. I honor those who came before us, way, way, way before us, who felt like they had to have children in order to uphold the human race. Y'all, we no longer have those. We know the human race is here. Okay. I mean, we might even say we overpopulated, right? I mean, that pressure to create and create and procreate and procreate and procreate. And even the idea, right? When you think biblically or when you think of a lot of religious texts that says that the importance for people to procreate, it's really rooted in like building civilizations. And so what it does do is remove that sex does that shouldn't or isn't always the primary purpose is to procreate. It can be for pleasure. So choosing to also be child free, childless, just not have a child, however you want to phrase it, is liberatory in a particular way because what it's saying is that my body is not a vessel that belongs to another person. That my body is a vessel that I can, if I choose to have children, allow it to be a vessel to bring children into the world, but I also don't have it to be that, right? Like it doesn't have to be that way. And I think there's something really beautiful about the choice. And if you are a person like me who made that choice, congratulations. Congratulations because you chose you And if you are a person who are like, child, what the fuck you say fuck them kids for? I love kids. I want to have kids. I want to have 8, 6, 9, 10, 35. Congratulations to you too, because you are choosing to put another person first. And that's also really beautiful. And I hope that with this episode and with me sharing my reasons, that you do your research and you do your work to realize that people are making these decisions for a variety of different reasons. That if you hear someone saying they don't want kids, that you don't automatically feel bad or go straight into preach mode where you let them know that they've made the wrong decision, that you actually don't pressure them to explain the reasons why they're choosing not to have kids. Because honestly, it really isn't your damn business. Really. And that you think about your body and you think about autonomy, because that's what this is. People who choose to not have children typically are talking about bodily autonomy as a root, that you have a choice to do that and you have a choice to not. And for those who don't have the choice, for those who are like, I really, really want to have kids, and there's people out here who have the parts that would make it, them able to do it, and they're not, my heart goes out to you too. Because I know that I am coming from a place where, I made that decision. I am not a person who, I made the decision to remove my uterus, i.e., the first episode. I made the decision to be, to not have children. I made those decisions. And someone can say, oh, well, what about adoption or what about foster care? That's a separate conversation. I will say, though, that what I'm standing on in this podcast and what I'm landing on in this podcast is autonomy. And it is about the decision to not birth a child from my body. And it's about the decision to put me first. And so I hope that there is an understanding that you have access to your inner power. And the more you have access to your inner power by having these tough conversations, by asking yourself questions, by doing your inner child healing, and really think about all the ways that people are socialized to do things that we may or may not want to do, that you take your power back. Thank you for listening to the Power Portal.